Introduction to Computers. This is Unit 2, and we're talking about web access and the Internet. First of all, we'll talk about service providers. You can look up the definition, but if we wanted to connect, let's say we have here in Mason City a network for a small business, and we also then had, let's say in Cedar Falls, a network, a small business, maybe a couple computers and so forth. And our business, we needed a connection between those two. We could pay a service provider to do that for us. They could do it through something similar to the phone system or whatever. Service provider could be a local phone connection. We connect to the service provider, so we could connect through our phone company through the service provider, and they could make the connection to Cedar Falls. Happens all over the world, big companies and so forth making these connections. This would develop for us, and a little review here, a wide area network. So we could have two local area networks connected, which would cause us to have a wide area network. Now, years ago, it started, I think, about 69, and then in the 70s they created the ARPANET. They came up this way to connect some of the major service providers created across the whole nation this interconnected way of connecting networks. So if there would be some type of disaster, our communications wouldn't be cut. Then, probably somewhere in the late 80s, they created this idea of a piece of software called a browser that could interpret HTML, hypertext markup language. We'll learn a little more about that later on. But it could take this markup language and convert it into something that looks nice on the screen. And to move that around, we could use hypertext transfer protocol. And we have those URLs. And they are able to move this information through the internet. So you could have a computing device of some sorts, a computer, a phone, or whatever, and if that could connect in via some network or whatever, and eventually get connected into the internet, we call those connections an internet service provider. Somebody provides that service. Then you could pull off of some other location that has a web presence, as a web server. You could pull that information off in that HTML form and come in here, and your browser would interpret, and so you can see it. And so it was discovered lots of things could be pushed through the web. This is one of them. World Wide Web, this whole idea of HTML, hypertext transfer protocol, links and so forth. We learn a lot more about that in Chapter 4. Also through the internet, we could send email. So you could have, let's say you have a Yahoo account, let's just say, and they have storage here in which they can store your email. So you could be in your little network at home or somewheres, and you can communicate then with your Yahoo email. You can read your email. Somebody could be at some other location on the web. Let's say somebody is here and they send you an email, and it's stored on the web server. Then you open up your email, and then a copy of it is brought to your computer. Now you could do that without using a browser, but nowadays browsers are also popular for managing email. It's important to know, we'll learn a few more specifics about email, but it's important to know that email is stored over here in this server. And even if you delete it, that server may have been backed up before you deleted it. So it's good to understand how your email works and so forth. Plus, email is not very secure. We have video conferencing, we have Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangout. So we have a way in which we can exchange information from actually multiple people. Can come in, and let's say here's Google. So they can come in on a video conference and everybody can view that at the same time. Or you can use FaceTime between your device and device via the internet. Access into the internet is always through an internet service provider of some type or another. Whether you're at a restaurant, or you're on campus, or you're at home, or whatever. You're going through that, and we learn more about that in the networking part. Instant messaging, you can look that up. Another way to send just a message between people. Chat, chat's used still a lot of different ways. I list here the idea of FaceTime, Skype, and Hangout. Those are sometimes referred to also as video conferencing because you can see the people. Or while you're visiting conferencing, you can also be chatting, typing information. Sometimes some businesses will allow you to connect in. You could be at home working on your computer. Let's say you're at home here and you have a PC and you're working on it and you need to get some help from some provider, some software provider. Let's say they're here on the internet, and then you can do a chat session with them. Social networking, the whole idea of sharing all the information that we do when we socialize via some type of technology. There'll be a lot of pluses for that, and there can also be a lot of negatives for that. And we'll talk more about that. That would be things like Facebook or Google Plus and so forth. Social networking. Texting, if you have a phone service, you can use that to text, and that actually wouldn't necessarily go through the internet. That wouldn't necessarily have to go through an internet. You could text through the plain old telephone service if you have a phone that allows you to text. And so that could actually go through something other than the internet. Tweeting would go through the internet. That microblogging, the 140 characters. It's interesting how tweeting was invented. You might want to look that up. But the whole idea of sending short messages, and that has become very popular. And we can look at that in class. Blogging, being able to have web logs. You can just type information and share it via everywhere. So somewheres could host your blog, let's say some website here. I'll make that green. Some website here, if you see over here, so it could host your blog, and then people from all over can come in and read the blog. Or that blog could actually be pushed out to different people. Crazy. Wikis, this whole idea of gathering information from lots of people to define something, like Wikipedia. It's an accumulation of lots of people editing, updating, and so forth information. We'll review a little bit this on the next page. Search tools. The search engine You shouldn't confuse that. There are lots of them. There's Google, Yahoo has one, Bing. Those are probably some of the major ones. There's other ones out there. This HTML, you can send these web crawlers or pieces of software that go out and look at all these websites and gather information off of those web pages, key terms and so forth. And then you can accumulate that. So Google has these huge places to accumulate that. And then when somebody does a search, they look actually here. It doesn't actually search the internet, and it finds the sites that have matches to that. Huge invention. Made the internet, made the use of the internet to find information at websites tremendously easy. Okay, this is a very good video that explains it. Probably if we're list the most important thing in this particular video is this right here. Content evaluation. It's very important that you evaluate the content you access via any electronics communication, especially through the internet. What do we mean by this? You need to determine the value of what you're reading. The internet can have lots of things that are opinions. There are people's opinions. There's some things that are facts, proven facts, and some things are just a gathering of a little of the both. Sometimes a Wikipedia, you have to be careful about that. Or sometimes you'll read something off the internet and you'll read one portion of it and you don't read the whole document, and so you really don't get the gist of what is trying to be said. There are some sites out on the internet that produce false information on purpose, either to be funny or whatever. They know it's false, but they produce it as if it's true. And then another important thing too, that you need to evaluate the content. There are some particular areas of the internet that are very sided. More or less, it causes you to polarize in one direction because they only give one view and make it look like it's the only view of a topic. They may give a completely conservative view, a completely liberal view, a completely Tea Party view, just as an example. And if those are the only sites you're ever going to, you're only going to get one side of the story. We are going to discuss this further in class. So, let me summarize here. So we have lots of ways to communicate, and so if we just talk about the internet, it's important to understand that when you connect into the internet, it goes through an internet service provider who in reality sees everything being transferred in and out. So later on when we talk about security, we'll talk about the importance of encrypting things. Okay? So here's you are. If you are going to use email as an example, that email is stored on some type of server somewheres. Okay, so then when you send an email, it goes to whoever server holds it. And then when they want to read it, wherever they are, they bring a copy of it back off to them. When we do any work in terms of like Facebook, that stuff is all stored somewheres. And that all has to go through internet service providers. And these pieces of information backed up on other devices, so they're not lost. So you don't know when you delete something if it's really gone. And there's even more technical things to mention about that. Alright? The internet has allowed for us, or even the phone system, plain old telephone system, sometimes called POTS, has allowed us to send and communicate extensively with other people using technology. And of course, a concern you may or may not realize is, in this whole thing, is what value does that bring to our lives, and how that might change how we interact with people. It can bring lots of value, but it can change how we interact with people. Because it's not the same using technology to communicate as it is to actually be in the presence of somebody. Even though technology has allowed us to video conference or FaceTime and whatever, it's still different than face-to-face. So in our world, we have to decide the values of this, the pluses and also the concerns. And that's it for this podcast.